He reached for her hand like it was instinct. Like he'd done it before, but I knew he hadn't. Or he shouldn't have. Waves crash softly in the background. Kids are laughing somewhere far off. The sun's low, just barely skimming the waterline like it's trying to decide whether to sink or stay a little longer. And I'm standing there, frozen. It wasn't a dramatic moment. No yelling. No slamming doors. No loud confessions. It was subtle. Quiet. Too quiet. Like the kind of quiet that slips beneath your skin and stays there. And the strangest part? It wasn't my hand he reached for. It was hers. And she wasn't me. I was standing there. On the beach. With my son. And in 1 second, one innocent little second, everything I thought I understood about my life cracked just enough to let something in. Something I hadn't let myself feel in years. Let me take you back. We were on a trip, just me and my son. Nothing fancy. Just a couple of days near the ocean, a break from school for him and for me. Well, I told myself it was a break from routine. But deep down, I think I was running from something. Or maybe hoping to remember who I used to be before everything became about schedules and lists and pretending to be fine. The kind of pretending that wears you out so quietly you forget you're even doing it. You ever get that feeling? Like you're still technically alive, but some part of you, the part that used to laugh at nothing or cry at songs or dream about things just because that part got buried somewhere along the way, that was me. I was the wife, the mother, the dependable one. The one who doesn't need much. But that day on the beach? That ordinary little afternoon? Something happened. And I don't mean anything explosive or scandalous, not yet anyway. I mean the kind of thing that slips under your ribs and settles there. A look. A gesture. A boy reaching for the wrong hand. And the realization that maybe it wasn't so wrong at all. The worst part? It felt right. And I hate that. I hate how right it felt, because it made me ask questions I had no business asking. Like, who am I when no one's watching? What do I do with this ache I've carried around for years but never admitted to? And why, just why, did this stranger, a man I wasn't supposed to even notice, feel more like home than the house I sleep in every night? The wind picked up, brushing my hair across my face. My son was laughing, his tiny feet splashing through shallow tide pools. He had no idea. He didn't know what I saw, what I felt, what I was trying to stop myself from feeling. But I saw it, clear as day. The way this man looked at her hand before he touched it. The way he knew she'd let him. And the way something in me cracked just a little, not from jealousy, but from recognition. Recognition of something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. So, if you've been here before, welcome back to Passionate Tales Unfold. And if this is your first time, settle in, my love. This isn't just a story. It's a wound, a want, a whisper in the dark. It's one of those truths we only tell ourselves when we're alone. And tonight, you're not alone. You'll feel this one. I promise. Now let's go back to the beginning. It was the kind of beach that doesn't show up in brochures. Not the type with boardwalks or umbrella drinks or rows of colorful towels lined up like soldiers. No. This place was quieter, raw. It was off-season, which meant we had most of it to ourselves. Just a stretch of pale, sleepy sand, the kind that holds onto footprints like it doesn't want to let go. The wind whispered through the seagrass in soft waves, matching the rhythm of the tide. Everything felt held back. Like even the ocean wasn't in the mood to speak too loudly. My son, he's 6, was humming to himself, holding my hand the way little boys do when they haven't learned to let go yet. There's a weight to that, you know? That trust. That soft, small grip that believes you can make the whole world safe. We walked slowly, his sandals dangling from his fingers, wet sand sticking to his calves. I let him lead. He found wonder in everything, a broken shell, a bit of driftwood, even a crab claw half buried in sea foam. He'd stop and study it, wide-eyed, turning to me like I had all the answers. I used to. Or at least I pretended to. It was unseasonably warm for early spring. The kind of warmth that clings to your skin and makes you think maybe life isn't in such a rush after all. But beneath it, there was a stillness. A kind of hush that didn't sit quite right, like the world had paused itself, holding its breath, waiting for something. I felt it in my chest, a tightness, a flutter. That quiet anxiety that's so familiar it becomes background noise. The waves rolled in and out steady, relentless. And I walked beside them, pretending I was just another mom on a quiet beach trip, making memories. But the truth is, I wasn't just here for him. I was trying to remember who I was too. My husband was away again. He said it was a business trip. I didn't ask questions. We don't really do that anymore. That's the thing about distance, it doesn't show up all at once. It creeps in slowly. A missed call here, a short reply there. A smile that doesn't quite reach anymore. Until one day you wake up next to someone and realize you haven't really seen them in months. We used to be so close. Or maybe I just believed we were. I used to wait for his texts like they meant something. I used to light candles and plan little surprises when he came home. Now, I just make sure the house is clean and the kids fed. That's what it's come down to. He's working hard, I'd tell myself. He's doing it for us. But it's hard to believe that when you're lying in bed alone, night after night, listening to the sound of your own heartbeat echoing against the walls of a marriage that doesn't hold warmth anymore. So I booked this trip. Last minute. Just me and my son. A break. A breather. A place to just be without anyone needing anything from me except for love that I still had to give. And I did love him, my son. God, I loved him with everything I had left. But I was tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes. The kind of tired that comes from always holding up the ceiling of a life that no longer supports you. He was skipping now, making up a song as he went. Something about pirates and treasure and sea monsters that smiled too much. He was so alive, so unaware of the slow erosion happening inside me. And I envied that, his innocence. His ability to be in the moment. I used to have that. Before the routine. Before the silence in my marriage grew so loud it filled every room. We came to a bend in the beach where the tide had carved out little pools between the rocks. I stood there, watching the sun start to dip, painting everything in that syrupy gold that makes the world feel softer than it is. The light touched his curls. He laughed and jumped into a puddle, splashing my legs. I smiled without meaning to, and for a second, just 1 second, I felt a flicker of something that wasn't sadness. But then the wind changed, and I looked up, and I saw someone I didn't expect to see. A man, walking the shore from the opposite direction. Alone. Deliberate. Like the beach belonged to him. I didn't know then what that moment would become. I didn't know what it would awaken in me, or what it would take from me. All I knew was that the quiet that had followed me for months suddenly didn't feel so quiet anymore. And that's where it began. Not with a kiss. Not with a lie. But with a shift in the air and a presence I hadn't invited. But couldn't ignore. He walked like the tide knew him. Not fast, not slow, just certain. Like he belonged to the rhythm of this place. Like he wasn't interrupting the quiet, but part of it. His figure moved through the haze of salt air and late sun, getting clearer with every step. There was something familiar about him. But not in the way you recognize someone. It was deeper than that. More like the feeling you get when you hear a song you forgot you loved. A memory you never quite made, but still miss. And then my son waved. Just a little wave. Casual. Easy. Like he knew him. Which was strange. My son is usually shy with strangers. He holds tight to me in crowds, buries his face into my legs when someone new says hello. But now? He just waved. Smiled, even. I looked down at him, confused. Do you know him, baby? He shrugged. No. But he looks nice. And then the man was there close enough to see his eyes. He had this presence, not loud, not showy. Just quietly certain. And his smile. It wasn't the kind people flash out of habit. It was slower. Warmer. the kind that waits for you to catch it. He glanced at me, then crouched gently so he was eye level with my son. "Hey there," he said, voice low and kind. "You looking for treasure in these tide pools?" My son nodded enthusiastically. "I found a crab claw." The man's eyes lifted to mine. "Ben," he said simply, offering a small nod. "Not too much. Just enough." I hesitated. I should have nodded back politely, said something breezy, something appropriate. Something like, "Nice to meet you. We're just heading back." But I didn't. I stood there. Ben turned his attention back to my son. "These pools over here," he pointed just past the bend, where rock met water, "they're full of tiny creatures right now. Little starfish, sea slugs, even baby urchins if you're lucky." Then he looked at me again. Really looked. There was something in his gaze, something steady. Not challenging. Not flirtatious. Just aware. Like he saw the tiredness behind my eyes and didn't turn away from it. And then he asked, "Would you mind if I showed in the tide pools? Just over there." His voice was calm, gentle, almost too gentle. My stomach fluttered. Not in that dizzying teenage way. No, it was something older. Sharper. More dangerous. Because I knew the right answer. The safe answer. The married answer. I should have said no. I almost did. My mouth opened. But my voice caught in my throat. And before I could form the words, my son looked up at me, eyes wide and hopeful. "Please, Mommy? Just for a little." Ben was already walking slowly toward the pools, pausing, waiting for me to speak. Waiting for my permission. I felt the weight of it. Of the moment. Of the 1,000 little warnings brushing against my skin like wind against a match. My heart was thudding. Too loud in my chest. My feet were in the sand, but it felt like I was standing on the edge of something. Something I wasn't supposed to see, let alone step toward. I gave the smallest nod, barely a breath of motion. And my son took off after him, barefoot and delighted. Ben glanced back once. And I caught it, just the flicker of something unspoken in his eyes. Not a smirk. Not a question. Just an invitation. Silent. Open-ended. One I didn't yet know how to refuse. We walked together. Not side by side exactly, more like in this shifting formation, where my son was always a few steps ahead, darting toward the edge of the surf, squealing whenever a wave chased him back. The tide had pulled far enough to reveal that rocky lip of beach, uneven, dark, glistening with salt. The kind of place that felt older than anything else around it. Like it had stories buried in it, things left unsaid. Ben walked beside me, but he didn't press. He kept a gentle distance. Enough space for me to feel unspoken permission to stay in my own thoughts, but not so far that I forgot he was there. And I didn't forget. The air felt different here. Heavier, cooler. The wind picked up, lifting strands of my hair and brushing them across my cheek. I tucked them behind my ear, suddenly self-conscious of the small, automatic movement. I hadn't cared how I looked all day, hadn't planned to care, but in that moment, I did. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was something else. Charged, maybe. Thick with things that weren't being said. The sky was beginning to change. That late afternoon gold, the kind that only lasts a few minutes, spilled across the water like melted honey. It made everything look softer. Even the jagged rocks. Even him. Ben had his hands in his pockets, shoulders relaxed, eyes scanning the ocean like it was telling him something I couldn't hear. I stole a glance. There was a kind of calm in him that unnerved me. Not in a bad way, just in a way that reminded me how tightly wounded I'd become. He didn't fidget. He didn't check a phone. He didn't fill the space with small talk. He just stood there, present, unrushed, watching the waves break and then retreat like they were part of his own breath. And every so often he looked at me, not staring, not invading, but catching my gaze in that quiet, unflinching way that says, "I see you. And worse, I know you don't let many people see you." There was no reason to be nervous, I told myself. He was a stranger. Just a man on a beach who liked tide pools and spoke kindly to children. That was all. And yet, every cell in me was alert. My skin felt more awake than it had in months. Years, maybe. The fabric of my dress suddenly too thin. The air too intimate. The sounds, waves, wind, my son's laughter were all heightened, amplified, like I was hearing the world through someone else's ears. I crossed my arms, not because I was cold, but because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. And he noticed. Not in a dramatic way. He just tilted his head slightly, then looked back toward the water, as if to say, "It's okay. You don't owe me anything. I'm just here." That should have comforted me. But instead, it unraveled something. Because in that quiet, in that space between words, I realized I was starving. Not for him. Not yet. But for this. For the stillness of being near someone who didn't ask anything of me. Who didn't need me to explain or perform or pretend. My son shouted something about sea snails and darted farther ahead, still within sight. The tide was gentle today, the pool shallow. Ben watched him with the kind of easy attentiveness that felt effortless. Not performative. Just present. Grounded. I hadn't been around that kind of energy in a long time. I didn't realize how much I missed it until I was standing next to it. He finally spoke again. Low, slow. Almost like he was afraid to break the spell. "He's got your spirit," he said. I blinked. "What do you mean?" Ben smiled softly, eyes still on my son. Curious. Bold. Kind of wild. Not afraid to get messy. I didn't know what to say to that. Because it had been so long since anyone had described me that way. So long since I'd even thought of myself as anything more than tired, responsible, fading, and it caught me off guard how deeply those words landed. How much I wanted to believe him. We stood in silence again, the moment stretching, like the tide itself was pulling at the space between us. And I stayed there, suspended in that strange warmth, trying not to name what I was feeling. Because once you name it, it becomes real. And I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. There was another family down the beach. I hadn't noticed them before, maybe because the beach had been so still, so wide open, it felt like we were the only ones in the world. But now I saw them. A couple with 2 kids, sitting on a patch of towel, passing around juice boxes and snacks. The woman tossed her head back in laughter, touching her partner's arm like it was second nature. Like breathing. There was something raw in that moment, not the happiness of it, but the effortlessness. The way she leaned into him without thinking. The way he turned to kiss her temple, like that kind of touch had never been questioned. Like it had never been withheld. Ben noticed them too. I saw it in the flick of his eyes, quick and quiet. And then he looked away. But not before something passed through his face. Not envy, not exactly. Something deeper. Older. Like a memory he didn't speak of anymore. Or a wound that didn't quite close. I didn't ask. I didn't dare. Instead, I watched the couple for a few seconds longer, trying to remember if my husband had ever touched me like that in public. Maybe once. Early on. Before business trips started multiplying. Before I started rehearsing every conversation in my head just to keep things peaceful. Before us became functioning. Not loving. Just surviving. Clean kitchens. Paid bills. Smiles in front of other parents. Mommy. My son's voice broke through, giddy and sharp. He was running toward me, hands cupped, something gleaming inside. "A shell," he shouted. "It's perfect. Look." He reached me, breathless, cheeks pink. His tiny fingers opened to reveal a pale, spiraled shell, still wet with ocean. It caught the light just right, glimmering like a pearl caught in motion. Ben came up behind him, crouching beside him without a word. Shoulders touching. Heads tilted. No fanfare. No announcement. He just fit there. Too easily. Like this wasn't the first time. Like the 3 of us had done this before. Like he belonged to that moment as naturally as the tide belonged to the shore. I felt it before I could stop myself, that quiet ache. The image. The dangerous, beautiful image of what a different life could have looked like. One where Sunday mornings were slow and barefoot. One where laughter came from deep in the belly, not the back of the throat. One where someone like Ben was just there. No need to ask where he was or when he'd be home. No passwords. No silence at dinner. Just presence. Safety. My son held up the shell to both of us. We should keep it, he said. Ben smiled at him. Definitely. That's a treasure. I should have smiled too. I probably did. But inside, everything was shifting. Because I could see it now. A version of myself kneeling beside them, not on guard. Not half checked out. Not carrying all this unsaid weight. I could see her laughing freely, reaching for Ben's hand without second-guessing, letting him kiss her temple just because. And I didn't know if that version of me ever existed, or if she still could. He stood again, brushing the sand from his hands. Our eyes met. Just a second too long, and all the silent questions I'd been holding rose like steam off sun-warmed rock. Who is he really? Why is he here? Why does this feel like a beginning or an undoing? I didn't ask any of it out loud, and he didn't offer. But something passed between us anyway. A knowing, a tremble. Not everything needs words to be heard. Some truths announce themselves in glances, in nearness, in the things we don't say. And in that moment, the unspoken between us felt louder than anything I'd heard in years. My son wandered back toward the water, shell still clutched tight in his little hand, already scanning the shore for the next treasure the sea might give up. I watched him for a moment, heart full but heavy, until the sound of Ben clearing his throat brought me back. Not loud, just enough. Just a soft invitation. There was a flat rock just behind us, weathered and sun-warmed. He motioned toward it with a tilt of his head, not speaking. No pressure. Just presence. I nodded. We sat. Not close. Not touching. But the kind of distance where you feel the other person in your skin anyway. The wind had dropped, softened, like even the air knew to hush itself. The crashing of the waves took on a different rhythm, steady, hypnotic. The beach behind us had emptied even more, the family I'd noticed earlier now just blurry outlines at the edge of my awareness. I brushed a strand of hair from my face. The breeze had tangled it again. I didn't do it to be noticed. It wasn't meant to be graceful. It was just something to do with my hands. But he saw me, not just looked, saw. His gaze was gentle, unwavering. Like he wasn't afraid of whatever he might find when he really looked at someone. Like he wasn't trying to fix or seduce or judge. Just witness. And that somehow felt more intimate than anything I'd known in a long time. Then he said it. Soft. Steady. Like he was offering me a door instead of a question. You can still leave. My breath caught. Because it wasn't just about this moment on the rock. It wasn't just about the almost touches or the heat rising between us like mist. It was bigger than that. He was naming something I hadn't admitted to myself. The way I'd been drifting. Wanting. Not just away from my husband, but toward something. He didn't say what. He didn't have to. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because what do you say to a truth that calls you out so quietly? I just stayed. I didn't move. Didn't lean in. Didn't pull away. And that said more than anything else could have. Our hands rested between us on the cool stone. Not touching. But close. His fingers broad, still, sun-dusted, sat inches from mine. Close enough that I could feel the warmth of them radiating into the space between. Like my skin knew the shape of his without ever having held it. The wind stilled almost eerily. The sounds around us faded, all but the soft lap of the sea. It was as if the world was pausing again, waiting to see what I'd do. And I wanted to move. I wanted to reach across those few inches and close the gap. To know what it felt like to rest my hand in his, just for a moment. To see if the weight of it would calm something in me. But I didn't. Not yet. Because there was something sacred about that space between us. Something fragile. unnamed. And I didn't want to break it by moving too fast, or by pretending I understood what was happening between us. I just sat there, heart pounding, breath shallow, shoulders slightly turned toward him without meaning to. I wasn't ready for what that moment meant. But I didn't pull away. And in that not pulling away, something shifted. A thread stretched taut between us. A silence that wasn't empty, but full. Of yes, of maybe, of not yet. He turned his palm upward, barely. The smallest gesture. Like an open window. I looked down at it, then back at the horizon, where the sun was now bleeding slowly into the sea. And still, I didn't touch him. Not yet. Because sometimes, the ache of not touching is louder than the touch itself. And in that ache, I felt seen. I felt alive. We walked again. Not like before, when it was three of us, light and casual, with my son running ahead, shouting about seaweed and pirate treasure. This time was slower. Weighted, not by discomfort, but by something we hadn't named yet. Something that curled around us with every quiet step. My son was far ahead again, chasing the last flickers of sunlight caught in the foam. His joy was its own kind of music, high and free, but distant now. Background. Ben walked beside me. Not close enough to touch, but close enough that I could feel him. Like heat near skin. Like gravity. The sand shifted suddenly beneath my foot, and before I could even register it, his hand was at my arm. Studying me. It was brief. Barely a second. But the imprint of it stayed long after. He didn't grip. He didn't rush in like a hero. He simply held for a moment. Like his instinct wasn't to rescue me, but to be there. Present. Grounded. And then he let go. But not all the way. Because even when his hand wasn't there, I still felt it. On my skin. In my pulse. In the air between us. We paused on a rise in the sand, just before it dipped back toward the tidipools. He turned to me, and his gaze dropped, slow, hesitant, just for a breath, to my lips. Not hungry. Not desperate. Just curious. Like he was wondering if the moment would ask for more. But he didn't kiss me. He didn't lean in. And in that restraint, I felt more unraveled than if he had. I looked away first. My heart was thudding again. That nervous, fluttery kind, the kind I hadn't felt since I was 20-something, standing in parking lots at midnight, hoping a boy would reach for my hand before the goodbye. I wrapped my arms around myself, even though it wasn't cold. And I said it. Quiet. Raw. A truth I hadn't told anyone, not even myself in words. Sometimes I forget what it feels like to be seen. This sentence hung in the air. Not dramatic. Not begging. Just honest. And immediately, I wanted to take it back. Not because it wasn't true, but because it was too true. Too naked. Too soft in a world that didn't always know what to do with softness. But Ben didn't rush to fill the space. He didn't offer sympathy or reassurance or any of those empty comforts that people give when they don't know what else to say. He just looked at me. Really looked. And in his eyes, I saw something shift. Not pity. Not even surprise. Just knowing. Like he understood. Like he hadn't forgotten what it felt like to be seen, and that's why he recognized that I had. His silence didn't feel empty. It felt full. Full of things he wasn't saying, because he knew words weren't what I needed. I needed this. This moment. This air. This aching in my chest that was finally loosening. I felt his hand move, slowly, from his side to his chest, pressing there, gently. Like he was studying something in himself. It was so small, so human, but I noticed it, and I knew whatever was unfolding between us, it wasn't one-sided. This wasn't just me catching feelings in the wake of loneliness. He was feeling it too. The weight, the pull, the quiet crash of something real. We didn't move for a while. We walked again. Not like before, when it was three of us, light and casual, with my son running ahead, shouting about seaweed and pirate treasure. This time was slower. Weighted, not by discomfort, but by something we hadn't named yet. something that curled around us with every quiet step. My son was far ahead again, chasing the last flickers of sunlight caught in the foam. His joy was its own kind of music, high and free, but distant now. Background. Ben walked beside me. Not close enough to touch, but close enough that I could feel him. Like heat near skin. Like gravity. The sand shifted suddenly beneath my foot, and before I could even register it, his hand was at my arm, studying me. It was brief, barely a second. But the imprint of it stayed long after. He didn't grip. He didn't rush in like a hero. He simply held for a moment. Like his instinct wasn't to rescue me, but to be there. Present. Grounded. And then he let go. But not all the way. Because even when his hand wasn't there, I still felt it. On my skin. In my pulse. In the air between us. We paused on a rise in the sand, just before it dipped back toward the tidipools. He turned to me, and his gaze dropped, slow, hesitant, just for a breath, to my lips. Not hungry. Not desperate. Just curious. Like he was wondering if the moment would ask for more. But he didn't kiss me. He didn't lean in. And in that restraint, I felt more unraveled than if he had. I looked away first. My heart was thudding again. That nervous, fluttery kind. The kind I hadn't felt since I was 20-something, standing in parking lots at midnight, hoping a boy would reach for my hand before the goodbye. I wrapped my arms around myself, even though it wasn't cold. And I said it. Quiet. Raw. A truth I hadn't told anyone, not even myself in words. Sometimes I forget what it feels like to be seen. This sentence hung in the air. Not dramatic. Not begging. Just honest. And immediately I wanted to take it back. Not because it wasn't true, but because it was too true. Too naked. Too soft in a world that didn't always know what to do with softness. But Ben didn't rush to fill the space. He didn't offer sympathy or reassurance or any of those empty comforts that people give when they don't know what else to say. He just looked at me. Really looked. And in his eyes, I saw something shift. Not pity. Not even surprise. Just knowing. Like he understood. Like he hadn't forgotten what it felt like to be seen, and that's why he recognized that I had. His silence didn't feel empty. It felt full. Full of things he wasn't saying, because he knew words weren't what I needed. I needed this. This moment. This air. This aching in my chest that was finally loosening. I felt his hand move, slowly, from his side to his chest, pressing there, gently, like he was studying something in himself. It was so small, so human, but I noticed it, and I knew, whatever was unfolding between us, it wasn't one-sided. This wasn't just me catching feelings in the wake of loneliness. He was feeling it too. The weight. The pull. The quiet crash of something real. We didn't move for a while. Not forward. Not back. We just stood there on the edge of something neither of us could name yet. The wind lifted my hair again. And this time, he reached out. Not to fix it. Not to make a move. Just to gently tuck one strand behind my ear. It was the smallest contact, but it felt like a door opening. And somewhere deep in me, a place I thought had long gone quiet, stirred. Not forward. Not back. We just stood there on the edge of something neither of us could name yet. The wind lifted my hair again. And this time, he reached out. Not to fix it. Not to make a move. Just to gently tuck one strand behind my ear. It was the smallest contact, but it felt like a door opening. And somewhere deep in me, a place I thought had long gone quiet, stirred. We stopped at a dune just high enough to see the whole stretch of the shoreline, where the tide slowly kissed the sand and retreated again, over and over like it couldn't make up its mind. The sky was turning gold, then pink, then something in between. That quiet hour when everything starts to let go. My son had wrapped himself in his towel like a little burrito and curled into the warmest patch of sand he could find. He'd run so hard, so free. And now he was just still, breathing steady. A soft flush on his cheeks. He looked safe. Peaceful. like the world hadn't yet taught him what it meant to ache in silence. Ben didn't say anything. He just looked at me, then down at my bare arms, and without asking, he pulled his hoodie over his head and handed it to me. I took it, not because I needed the warmth, but because something about wearing it felt like being allowed to exhale. I slipped it over my shoulders. The sleeves were too long, the fabric soft with age, and it smelled like wind and cedar and something I couldn't name but wanted to hold onto. I didn't thank him. Not out loud. But our shoulders brushed when I sat back down, and I didn't shift away. Neither did he. We sat like that for a long time. The waves kept coming. The sun kept slipping. The silence between us deepened, but it never turned heavy. It just was. Like breath. Like truth. Like something older than either of us that we were only just beginning to remember. I closed my eyes. Not to sleep. It was something deeper. Something slower. Like letting go of a weight I didn't realize I'd been carrying in every muscle, every bone. I let the silence hold me. And I didn't need to explain. I didn't owe anyone anything in that moment. Not my husband. Not the world. Not even Ben. I could just be there, in borrowed warmth, with a man who hadn't asked me for anything, but who had given me space I hadn't even known I needed. And that's when it rose in me. Quiet at first. Then sharp. A truth I'd pushed away for too long. I wasn't in love with my husband anymore, I said. Barely above a whisper. Maybe I wasn't even talking to Ben. Maybe I just needed to hear it out loud. I just didn't know what else I could be. There was no reaction from him. No shock. No questions. Just the soft sound of his breathing beside mine. In. Out. Like an answer without words. And something in me softened. Not collapsed. Not broke. Just eased. The tight places in my chest uncoiled. The sharp thoughts in my mind dulled. Because this wasn't about escape. Or lust. Or even longing anymore. This was about remembering myself. In a world that had asked me to be so many things to keep things running, to keep the peace, to keep smiling, I had forgotten how to just exist in someone's presence without effort. And now here I was, wrapped in his hoodie, our shoulders warm together, my son safe and dreaming beside me, the sky dissolving into color above us, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt like I didn't have to run, didn't have to pretend, didn't have to be anything more than just here. And it was enough. We walked back slowly. The sand cooler now, shifting under our feet with a softness that felt like the end of something. Or maybe the beginning, I didn't know yet. My son stirred just as we reached the boardwalk, his lashes fluttering against sun-warmed cheeks. He looked up at me, groggy and sweet, and mumbled something about the seashell he'd found. Ben smiled, just a little. Not wide, not expectant. Just enough. He reached out and gently ruffled my son's hair. And then he stepped back. No request. No promises. No pressure. He just gave space. A gift I didn't realize I'd been starving for. I looked at him then. Really looked. Not as the stranger on the beach. Not as the man who made my heart stir when it shouldn't have. But as someone who had seen me, not the wife, not the mother, not the calendar keeper or peacemaker, but me. And he didn't ask for anything in return. He didn't even say goodbye. Just gave a small nod and turned to go. He didn't look back. That part still stays with me. There was no dramatic end to that moment. No final word. No stolen kiss under the fading sun. It wasn't that kind of story. And yet it was everything. Everything I hadn't let myself feel in years. Everything I'd buried under to-do lists and business trips and half-hearted bedtime conversations. When I slid behind the wheel, my son already dozing again in the back seat, I sat for a second. The keys in my hand. Ben's hoodie still on my shoulders. The scent of the sea caught in my hair. And I breathed. Just breathed. The drive home was quiet. The sky dimming. Streetlights flickered on one by one, like little reminders that life was still happening all around me. But something in me had slowed, had softened, had shifted. When I pulled into our driveway, the porch light was already on. Not because he was home, but because it was set on a timer like everything else in our life. I checked my phone. One voicemail. From him. Hey, flight's delayed. Don't wait up. I didn't listen to the rest. I didn't need to. I deleted it. That day didn't break my vows. But it made me question who I made them for. And who I was when no one else was watching. Because love, real love, isn't always fireworks and declarations. Sometimes it's a quiet walk on a beach with someone who doesn't ask you to be anything except honest. And sometimes it's in the not looking back. I don't know what comes next, but I know I'll never forget that day. And I'll never forget how I felt. Held by the ocean, by the wind, by silence, and by someone who reminded me, without words, that I'm still here, and I still matter, even when no one else is paying attention. Some days, you don't need a single touch to feel like everything's been rewritten. A glance, a few words, a moment where everything you thought you knew about yourself just shifts, and you're left standing, not with answers, but with something softer. Something real. The kind of real that doesn't shout, but whispers. And when you hear it, you realize you've been holding your breath for so long. You didn't even know you needed the exhale. So, let me ask you this. What would you have done? If you've been standing where I stood, at that edge between what you know and what you're not sure you're ready to face? Would you have turned away? Would you have walked away with your heart locked tight inside your chest? Or would you have let that silence be enough and just felt? Tell me in the comments. I want to know. I want to understand how you would have seen it. Because we all carry our own truths, right? And if these stories, these quiet, intense, heart-shifting moments speak to you, if you found something in them that makes you feel, even just for a moment, like you're not alone, then stay with us. Stay with us at Passionate Tales Unfold. There's more where this came from. More moments. More silence. More stories of the kind of love and longing that can't be explained, but only felt. I'm glad you're here. And I hope you'll come back. Until next time.